Welcome, everyone, to this week's One People Show. I'm Lisa Harrison, and we are joined by, as always, Bob Wright.
Hello, Lisa. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Nice fade, Lisa, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And we have Chris Hales.
Good morning, everybody. How are we all? Good morning to afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the One People. And looking forward to a really good show today. We've got some really interesting and meaty stuff to get our teeth into. Should be fun.
And, of course, we have Brian Kelly. Are you able to unmute, Brian?
Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody. I am live from Northern California. I'm actually sitting here with my mom right now. And we are with my sick grandmother. She has Alzheimer's, and she's lived a full life, but she's making her transitioning right now. So we're up here with family. I'm actually sitting here with my mom. I'm not going to be here on the whole call, but my mom just wanted to say hi real quick.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I listen to all of you, and I'm so grateful that my son has connected with all of you. You are all doing amazing work.
You got to say hi to the listeners.
Hi, listeners.
We're going to be kind of in and out, guys. I love you all, and I'll be listening when I can. But I wanted to give my mom that quick cameo.
Well, you can tell your mum
She
that
feels
we're
like a
blessed to
star
have you
now,
as
so
part of the family. So.
Well, he gets Mr. Giggles from somebody, and I think it's me. I'm Mama Giggles.
Mama Giggles.
Mama Giggles.
Cool.
The original.
Well, thanks for coming on and saying hi.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Bye.
Okay.
See you, Brian.
Bye. Okay. It's been a big week, everyone, as we all know. It's only been a week. It's only been a week since we played that recording of the conversation with Heather and Dee, Bob and myself, and we got such a beautiful and concise history of the banking system. Brian, can you mute, darling?
Sorry, thought it was.
Okay. And the announcement that documents would be coming forward. And yes, we've expected them in the past week. And no, they haven't come about as yet. And there are reasons for that, which we're going to go into. However, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was getting prepared for them. And we've got some people coming on who are going to share their stories of their preparation. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But so before we move on, I just wanted to briefly tell you what I do know, which is last week during this show we put a call out for people to assist in helping clear the energetics around Heather and around the environment. And those of us who were in Morocco can speak to this in terms of, excuse me, the interference and the fun and games that went on while we were there. And within 24, at that point, I mean, it was Heather's intent was to have the documents up within 48 hours. And she was working on them. However, when the energy cleared, and it did, the occupants of the house that we were calling the Watchers moved out, which is extraordinary in itself. And once a lot of the energy cleared, the information for Heather came flooding in. And over the course of the next few days, 3 to 4 days, she took something like 21 pages of notes. And what she has spent the last 2 to 3 days doing is condensing that 21 pages of notes into the documents that she's going to produce. So basically, once the energy cleared, it just opened up all the channels for so much more information to come in. And we're down to, she's worked her way through, I think, about 10 pages of her notes and condensed it into 3 pages of the final document that she's very, very happy with at this point. So she's got about 11 to go. And she's doing it in big chunks, 10, 12-hour chunks, where she leaves the house and just works solidly on it. Now, from my perspective, I don't want these things out until they're perfect. I don't want to have them out and then for us to have to work through too many bugs. So if it takes another week, then that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine with me. But and she won't release them until they're perfect, to her standard at least. So that's where we're at. So what we can do in the meantime is get prepared for them. And as I said, that's one of the things we're going to talk about today, and we've got people coming on to talk about that. However, before we even get to that, Chris, you've got some announcements.
We do have a couple of things. Firstly, I'll be doing an update with Captain Derrill this week. Please keep an eye out for that. He's actually had another round in the courts in the last week, and he's successfully managed to get the false charge of criminal trespass reduced to just a misdemeanor, and also managed to get the right to challenge the bank as to who actually owns the property now. So he's got another round in the courts, unfortunately. Obviously, he's playing in the courts. We don't want to be there because they're just fake courts anyway, but he's actually got another round in the courts in the weeks to come. But the bank's on the back foot now because they're going to have to start producing documentation as to what's actually going on, whether they actually can prove they own the property or not. So, court's out on that one at this stage. The other is a new show, Lisa, which we were talking about just before. And the new show is going to be on the 5D Media Network. It's going to be on Mondays, and it's going to be called The Repurposing.
Basically the same time in whatever time zone you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be Monday 10 a.m. for those of us in Australia on the East Coast, and 8 p.m. Pacific on the Sunday night for those in the States.
Now, I'll bring Scott out just at the moment. If you could unmute yourself, Scott. Scott and I are going to host this show, and
welcome,
what we're going to... You're welcome, Scott.
Hi, guys. Hi, everyone.
Very good. Scott's on the other side of the continent to us. That's why he might sound a little distant. I jest, Scott.
Yes.
Hello. The subject of this show is the big one. It's how do we get from where we are to where we want to be in the details. And it's going to discuss governance. It's going to discuss how do we repurpose everything around us in our communities from top to bottom to something new. How do you repurpose education? How do you repurpose academia? How do you repurpose the banks? How do you repurpose everything? And the topic will be different every week. We'll have different people speaking every week, and we really love your input because we'll be taking calls. We want to actually begin that burst of creativity because the objective here is the sorts of communities that we've started talking about, which everybody is really excited about. And Scott's and his dad Ken, aka, no, I won't spill the beans on that. Scott, you can spill the beans on that. We're going to be extending. We've been having conversations in the background for 6 months about all sorts of things, and we're just going to bring those forward. And we're going to bring in people who are also working on this stuff in the background, and we're going to get this conversation started. We don't really have time on this show and on the Collective Imagination show to go into stuff in detail, so this is it. That's why we called it the repurposing. Scott, would you like to add anything? Well, what would you like to add?
Oh, I think that's a pretty good summary. And the only thing I'd add is probably just introducing maybe or discussing some practical tools of how to share this information with those who are presently unaware of it. And when you mention that subject to them, they shut down and go into fear mode or ridicule you or label you as a nut job or anything like that. It's like, well, how can we introduce this subject to those in a way that has them go, oh, yeah, maybe I'll have a look at that. So that's one of the things I'd like to achieve as well.
Yeah, that's the important one because, if you suggest it to people, we could have a an entire civilization without money, you actually get a fear response. But if you actually talk with them, if you work them through it, put scenarios to them, make them think it through, I've found about 20 minutes or so, you can get them to the point where they're actually kind of excited about the idea, because they can see how the whole situation, the whole system will actually flip from being one where everything is scarce to one where everything is just available. And it's all about goodwill. So, yeah, absolutely bang on, Scott. We've got a lot of talking to do the next few months. It's going to be fun.
Actually, you just reminded me of it. I think I was telling you about it last night. There was a story that I read a few years ago, which I've just seen as a video that was made as a 10-minute short, I think, Mexican film. Mm-hmm. American Kabuki put it on his website.
Yes, gorgeous.
It's just lovely. It's called $100. And it shows you how ridiculous this concept is of paper money. It's a couple who drive into an old Mexican town that seems somewhat deserted, but and they're looking for a place to stay. The guy goes into a hotel, says he'd like to see a room, and the guy behind the counter says, "Sure, it's $100." And he said, "What? Just to see it?" And he said, "If you don't like the room, you get your $100 back, no problem." So he gets a kid to take this older gentleman out to have a look at this suite. And while he does that, he runs out the door with his $100 and goes and pays the woman at the local cafe for the tab he's accumulated at the cafe. Then goes back to his hotel. She then takes the $100 and runs to the butcher, because she's been running up a tab with the butcher. Pays him up. He then takes that same $100 note and goes to the abattoir, I guess you would call it, and pays his bill that he's been running up there. That guy takes his $100 note and goes to the rancher that he buys his cattle off and pays up his bill with him. The rancher then drives into town and grabs the local prostitute, who takes her clients to the hotel. She goes into the hotel with that same $100 bill, pays up her bill, including for the room she's about to use with the rancher. Just as they leave, the old boy comes back and says, "I don't like the room, I want my money back," and he gets that $100 note back. So that one piece of paper got passed around town, and everybody was satisfied. Everybody was paid up. And then the original guy leaves town with the same $100 bill. So what just happened? Everybody just made a mental and emotional forgiveness, a step of forgiveness, I guess. And they start over again. And it's brilliant. It's beautiful. And it's just lovely illustration of what we do here.
Yeah, it was perfect. There was every debt in the town was paid off. Mm-hmm. And the instrument by which that was carried out came into the town and left the town, and it needn't have even been there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chris, from a perspective, it's quite comical. It's really, I mean, looking at it from an objective perspective, like if you were, let's say, one of our cosmic cousins who had never experienced Earth and just watched that transaction, you would have to laugh. Like, what are they doing? It's passing this piece of paper around, is making everyone happy. Because really, what is it used for? Just passing it around.
I did.
Yeah, it's simply an expectation that we've been trained in. It's been created in us. And one of the most serious challenges we have is to actually remove the fear of removing that particular aspect of our lives, and it'll just fall away. And one of the things that everybody on this panel, everyone who's listening, is really excited about is the prospect of accessing value, for instance, which will have the effect of causing that fear to fall away. And as Lisa's been saying for some time, the day we discover how rich our actual value is followed by the day after, where we realise that money was always irrelevant.
Yeah, I think so. I do believe that. And because then we realise just that passing that piece of paper around town is absolutely pointless. We can just go, oh, well, basically I forgive you a bill that you've racked up, and pass that around instead.
Yeah.
Exactly, and or we could simply do it, just by agreement, which is the first step on the path of pure energetic exchanges.
Now, Bob, could you call? I've just added her. Could you call Helen in? Now, this is someone who has been doing some prep work.
Now, I just had a message from Helen. The last interviewee just turned up, so she's going to be a little while yet. So,
okay.
Perhaps if we proceed with the conversation we're going to have with Scott and Uwe. And Bob, if you could drag Uwe in, you should have his name in your contacts.
I do.
Now, what's happened last week? Lisa, I'll just give a description of what happened last week. We had a call. I had a call from Helen Vita, who's an avid supporter of the One People movement down here in Melbourne. On I think Thursday last week, and she explained to myself and Uwe and Scott that she was going to book interviews with what in Melbourne are called mobile lenders. Now these are basically bank brokers who travel around in cars doing interviews for loans and helping people fill out forms and do paperwork, sort of bringing the bank to your house.
Yep,
to basically come to your house and rob you there instead of going into a building and being robbed. Okay, it's all good fun. And so she actually booked up and had 4 interviews on Friday with mobile lenders from different banks. And as we speak, she's having the 5th interview, and she'll be joining us in the second hour. And the objective of this process was to find out the level of knowledge right down at the broker level, right down at ground level where they actually interact with the people, find out how much knowledge they had of promissory notes and what sort of reaction they had when the proposition was put to them. Hey, do you guys deal with promissory notes? And she's given us a preliminary report on the 4 that she did on Friday, which was extremely interesting. And she's just doing a 5th one as we speak. So she's covered the big 4 banks and a community bank, what we down here call I went to use the word society, but I could only think of the word slave to put in front of it. Slave society.
Building society?
Building society, yes. Credit you. Well,
funny. Okay.
That was an interesting experience. I want to relive that one again. So we had some long conversations about how you go about talking to people, and what we're really into is the preparatory phase for the document set that's coming, because the task will fall to us as individuals to literally go to these organizations, start conversations with the appropriate people, and that's one of the objectives of this exercise, is to find out the most practical place to start, but at the same time building up a sort of set of conversations so that we can talk to these sort of salespeople, if you want to call them that, and we can talk to our bank manager, and we can talk to the guy above him and the guys above them. Now we've just pulled another special guest into the room, Uwe Schafer, who works very closely with Scott on a number of things on a sort of continuous basis. And between them, Uwe and Scott, like a little A-team, if you like, they are quite busy making plans for shifting the system in different directions. And Uwe is an ex-financial services broker, so he can speak directly to the level of knowledge and the likely sorts of responses that we'll get. Good morning, Uwe.
G'day, mate.
How are you?
Uwe.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. So Helen's doing her thing right now. What I wanted to ask you first up was, when you were in the banking industry, which was you did about a 6-year stint in Perth, were you actually trained in any way in promissory note technology or securitization technology? Was it even mentioned to you as a financial broker?
Never heard of it until 2 years ago when I quit the industry.
And you quit the industry because?
I heard of it.
What brought it up? How did you come across it, though? Was it within the industry or outside?
No. It was outside the industry, through a friend who pointed me towards what we're discussing right now.
And what particular thing was it? Was it a YouTube video or a website?
At the time, it was an Australian-based website called Truthology, And a gentleman, Mark Darwin, I believe, there did some really good work on explaining the corporatisation of the government at the time. So I had no idea that the Commonwealth was a registered corporation. However, underlying, I must have known, because that immediately opened up so much curiosity that I started digging really deeply, and from there found that it related to banking, which undermined all my work. So I really couldn't continue.
And what was the response from your employers when you told them you couldn't continue because essentially they were corrupt?
In fact, I only told my staff member and my secretary. I didn't actually tell the owner that I was contracting to of the franchise for the lender that I was working with, simply because he did not have the capacity mentally to handle it. I've got to know the gentleman, so I didn't want to, make him jump off the next bridge. I've just left it rest quietly.
So you didn't talk to anybody within the industry about what you learned?
Yes, talked to my secretary, who probably left 2 weeks after me, but she still is in finance at the moment.
And have you talked to any of your fellow brokers in the industry?
Lots of them. Over the last 2 years, yes, I have. Lots of the brokers I talked to. There is a lot of resistance. Okay.
Look, it's understandable for them because it's basically, they will have a fear response, because if they accept what you're saying, then they're out of a job.
That is correct.
But at the same time, if the banks actually were going to publicly accept promissory notes, they wouldn't need a job.
Yeah. Bit of that catch-22 situation that we're sitting in right now, isn't it? It is. Obviously, our work's trying to connect those two dots.
Yeah, you would have to connect those two dots. So in your view, how far up the bank do we have to go? How far up the average banking structure before you get to that compartmentalised area where they do the actual monetisation of the signature? Would it be above the lending manager, above the processing, the processing department where they're putting the paperwork through? How far up would that knowledge actually exist in the bank?
That would probably be, I don't know exactly to answer that. However, I believe it would be a very small group of people in the bank who actually does these transactions. And my friends in loan processing is a sausage factory, okay? There are, in the boom in Australia, there was a bank called ANZ, or still is a bank called ANZ, who used to process for the other lenders. I believe it was in Adelaide, their centre. In the peak of securitising in probably 2003 to 6, they would process some 40,000 loans a month through this centre. There's thousands of people working there just going through and vetting their loan application forms. And from there it gets bundled and it's basically completely removed from that system. So I really don't know how far further up you have to go to come to might only be a handful of people who do this, really. Because they get it in bundles. They don't look at individual loans anymore. That work's done already. So they get a bundle of 500 million or whatever, and they go, okay, which tranche, which trust are we going to bundle that one into?
So working from the top down, would you expect the CEO, the CFO, that level of banking to actually be fully aware of these processes?
They would have to be.
Yeah.
Any further down the food chain than that, though? Or from there it would be into a very small, elite little department?
Yes, clearly they run a complete divide and rule situation or a need-to-know basis to keep any of this information from people at the ground. If you knew what's really going on, would you still go out and sell a loan? Of course not.
No, well, it puts their whole system in a complete state of, irrelevance.
Well, it's purposely compartmentalized.
Yes.
It's very purposely compartmentalized. But what you'll end up getting a lot of times when you expose people who are on the lower rung of the ladder, you're going to get stock answers. What they've been told to say. And how I would handle that is, that's a very interesting perspective. Can you show me where that's in print? Because what I'm saying is according to your regulations. Can you show me the regulations that say that?
Indeed. In fact, Helen has actually been asking, in a gentle way with these folks, asking similar questions. Can you tell me who inside the bank I need to talk to? And we'll let her speak to that when she comes on. But I guess the sense that I'm getting from this discussion and the discussions we've had previously is that there is great value in introducing these concepts from the bottom up in the banking system, having these conversations, because it sets an energetic seed growing inside that part of the organisation, just like the courtesy notices did and continue to do. But that the real people will probably have to be talking to do the real work, which is to come to a contractual arrangement, a new arrangement with these folks, will probably have to happen at a higher level initially until they set up, in fact, what we would hope would be a new retail product.
Well, my uncle did have a conversation with his local bank, and it was only a branch manager. Now, mind you, this branch manager had been in the banking industry for 27 years. I also believe that Helen spoke to one. And it seems when they have that much experience, they kind of know. He confirmed, number one, that they create the money upon the receipt of the note, that they do not lend out their deposits, or they don't touch their reserves, as he stated. Number three, that they do sell those notes.
All of it.
So
Wow.
he knew, but just like Helen had the same response, but that's not available to the public.
Yes, that's something that does come out in one of Helen's interviews. So, in your view, Uwe, we really, well, in my view, I think we need to go. We need to probably speak to as many people as we can. In your view, would you jump in? Would you work your way up from the bottom, or would you just go straight, as Bob's uncle did, to as far up as you can?
There's a lot of us, Chris. I would actually put together a task force and spread out and build like a tentacle ourselves, where some try bank managers, some have connections, they can call on those. Some go to the mobile lenders, some go to the branch themselves, where the lending manager may be the local manager or one below him, and start at sort of really the level that we can get to through our existing connections in our networks. And I was just thinking while you were saying that, when Scott and I talked about this, a lot of times we thought, okay, we're going to go in with some intention of getting those people to see something. We then came away from that thought, because getting somebody to do something is completely removing their choice. We really have to go in, or we might better be going in totally unattached to the outcome and literally just sharing with them, because whether you can't convert them on the spot. You're talking about generations of DNA embedded acceptance and apathy that we're talking about, all right? This is not going to go away in a 5-minute talk. For me, that wasn't an email that came through from a friend that was 5 minutes. For me, that was a whole lifetime of trying different industries, learning about the fraud without being aware of it. And when that email came, the timing was right, and it just opened the vault for me. So, I'm not trying to go into the bank or to any of the brokers that I talk to now and want to convince them on the spot to see my point and say, oh yeah, what I'm doing is crap, I'm going to stop going to work tomorrow. It's just not going to work. Does that make sense?
I mean, it perfect sense. I mean, this is a process, because the folks in the banking industry arrived at the perspective they've got through a long process. It's, as you say, a lifetime of programming. Yes. You can't undo that in a moment unless it's really ready to be undone. And we might find the occasional person that just goes ping and they're right across it. That would be like finding gold, if I may use that term. But for the most part, it's going to be an education process. And ultimately, when the banks actually capitulate, which they will have to do ultimately, this will actually become part of their process. And in doing it, the conclusion I've come to is that when the banking system is doing this in large numbers, they'll be self-repurposing. Yeah. They will actually, because there isn't one person in any community who wouldn't do this. Ultimately, they will repurpose themselves into being what they should always have been, which is simply a transaction centre. Now, they're not, the egoic way that they run banks and the the programming that exists throughout society, and let's talk specifics, in the shareholders of the banks and at the higher levels of the banks, all that programming has to be cut through. When we get some runs over the board, that will start. I think it'll start to fall away rapidly. And as you say, the softly approach, but everywhere in as higher numbers as possible, is probably going to get us the most the most useful result. Now, I'd like to bring Scott in because I know Scott has a very, very specific approach to this in terms of putting it to people in question form and keeping it non-threatening, non-controversial. Do you want to speak to that?
Can I just put one closing one on this thing that you're on, just a brief one?
Mm-hmm.
Chris, look, there's nothing stopping us from putting our little rascal pirate hats back on, all right, and have a bit of fun with this. Now, imagine if we were to contact the same mobile lender that Helen, let's say we all lived in Melbourne, and we were to contact that same mobile lender, and we booked 1, maybe 2 meetings a day with this guy in completely different areas of town, and get him to drive around a bit, spend the bank's money on petrol, and get put in front of this for a month, once a day, twice a day. Do you think they will start talking over the water cooler?
Actually, I think that's a wonderful idea, and actually quite easy to organise.
It is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the rascals come out here. Hand over to Scott.
No. You've actually done a lot of lending work yourself. What would happen if you were sitting in a retail shop and person after person after person came into your lending shop and asked you the same questions? People who appear to have no relationship to one another. Can I do this? Can I do this? Because you could do the same thing. You could all walk into a particular bank branch, just a couple a day. I want to do this. I want to do this, and you could actually have a citywide campaign. Sorry,
Brian said the same thing last week. Just get a group of people together instead of walking in the door en masse. Just have one walk in the door every half hour or every hour, doing the same thing, asking the same questions.
Mm-hmm.
If they get more than one person in a day asking that, that's going to get noticed.
Yes, it is. It is. And, if folks out there have time to do this, you could actually work your way around an entire community through all the banks, because what you could do is you could actually, if your day was Wednesday, you could visit, say, 4 or 5 banks in one day in your area.
Yeah.
And on Thursday, some other people would do it.
Chris, I wouldn't do this yet unless we have some proper material to leave with those guys. It's got to look professional. We don't want to come across like crackpots. No. It's got to look professional. We can leave something with them, and they may hide this under their desk because they go, oh shit, if this is true, it's a language. If this is true, what am I going to do? So, this will open so many questions, and all we want to do is raise the questions, not alarm bells. We really want to get deep down inside. I mean, you can't tell me that not one human being on this planet, except the ones who don't have compassion for other reasons, but our general population, you can't tell me that deep down inside we all don't know that there is something not right. It is
Sorry, I was just going to comment something that's going through the chat room, is that we don't have to wait till these new documents come online to do this. There is so much material out there, and Scott in particular has put together some amazing information that comes from the banking manuals themselves, comes from the government and the industry themselves.
Yeah, but organise yourself and take something in, Lisa. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That's it. Because you could take.
The response you usually get is, "Oh, wait, what? You read this on the internet?" They love to sort of write it off that way. So, if you're presenting them with information that is out of their own manuals, and that's already there. We've already got all that stuff.
Yes.
Indeed. In fact, Uwe and Scott have started working on a particular kind of document over the last day or so, which will probably be ready about the same time as Heather's material comes out. Now, also note, folks, that we're not too sure exactly the depth of Heather's stuff. I suspect it's going to be quite extensive. We want the material to align with that perspective, so everything's nice and consistent. And so it'll be a case of it will come out hard on the heels of the documents. But you could actually walk in with an iPad and show Scott's bankruptcy YouTube video to them.
So that people do know. Scott, if people want to get their hands on and actually print out all of the information you've got that comes from the banking manuals and all of that, where can they go specifically? And that would be your cue to unmute.
Yes. Hello, Scott.
Scotty. Well, Uwe, do you know
disappeared.
the answer to that?
A lot of this is on the site that Scott and I built together, which is the freespeechaustralia.org website.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the documents are on there. They're not in a concise form. They're one by one by one. So I generally print out what I need from there and use it in things when I email people or stuff.
Okay, so
we are currently
freespeechaustralia.org.
Freespeechaustralia.org.
Okay.
Now the current doc that Chris mentioned, we'll have to do a bit more work on this. Probably takes a few more days. That will have, in a nutshell, everything that you will probably need. And I haven't yet run it past Scott because it was only sort of started on yesterday. There will probably be some extensive changes to it still.
Yeah. We actually did do some work on it last night, Uwe.
And
you
did? Okay, yep.
there is a fair bit of surgery on it,
yep.
just to make sure that it's not too much. Because you had a fair bit of data there, and there's parts that we need to work on and need to keep consistent with the actual documents we'll be using too.
And a message from BZ is that she will also get the information that you've put on Free Speech Australia up on the IUV side as well.
Okay.
There's no harm in actually doing some research on Scott and Uwe's website and familiarising yourself with the material, because it's basically going to be restated in this context, so it'll be very similar. And there are a significant number of banking industry publications that blatantly just state we monetize signatures. We create money by depositing the signatures as cash. It's right there in their own manuals. And the neat thing about the kit that ultimately will come out is that it will draw a relationship between bank ownership in a very simple fashion. We have a document that shows that the Bank of England and several families in the United States own the Federal Reserve. We have documents that show, this is an Australian-centric comment, by the way, documents that show that the banks in Australia are completely beholden to the Federal Reserve. So you could put that in front of a banker. There's a UCC filing showing that all the four major banks in Australia are basically hocked to the hilt to the Federal Reserve. They've committed all of their assets to this arrangement with the Federal Reserve. So don't worry about the shareholders. The Federal Reserve will have first call on anything these banks actually do. So in Australia, we can actually show that the Australian banks aren't what they're purporting to be. They're part of an international banking system, and they're not under the control of the shareholders. And you can put that in front of a banker and say, here's your own statements that you monetize. I'm telling you we're part of a worldwide system that run a template for but essentially deceiving the people into having fraudulent mortgages. Here's the relationship between these banks that shows they're all part of the same system. And here is my proposal that you and I, Mr. Bank, have a different arrangement. And that's roughly what this document will be doing when you're actually sitting in front of someone having this conversation. Should be quite interesting, folks. Now, did Scott actually return to us? Hello, Scott.
Hello. Yeah, I was getting static in the background there.
We went Transformer on you, did we?
Oh, worse. Yeah, it was. Very digital.
Yeah. Were you able to hear the conversation for the last few minutes?
I got most of it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, every time Scott and I work on one of these documents, Scott's always beating me around the head to simplify. Fewer words, less concepts, just keep it really straightforward.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. I mean, essentially the message here is, I think for all of us, is it's time to start doing in this direction. We don't have to wait for what Heather's bringing out. That will be the end result. That'll be once we've had these conversations, once we've established the relationship, once we've got people playing with us, then we can go in with those documents and say, okay, now that we're on the same page, here you go. So there's much we can do in the meantime.
Lisa, if I can add to that, I'd suggest a large part of it is familiarising yourself with actually what is taking place. It only takes one curly question from one of those at the bank to basically...
Uwe, can you please mute, darling, while you're typing away?
Oh, sorry, I was. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, can you say that again, please, Scott?
Yeah, it only takes one curly question to essentially deflate you if you're unable to answer that. And the documents that you're taking into the bank, it pays to have a very good understanding of how it works, if only at the principal level. It may not necessarily be the absolute details of the name of the document and what reference number that document has to do what purpose. But if you can get your head around the principle involved and keep bringing the other party back to the principle and discuss it in those terms and explain it eloquently to that other party, that's where your power is going to remain.
Mm-hmm. And as Uwe just put in here, that a good question to ask any banker would be, would your bank be prepared to amend your credit agreements as follows? We, the bank, did in fact possess the money we loaned you prior to the loan being approved to comply with the fundamentals of contract law, because that is not in any contract you currently sign with a bank.
Yeah, that puts them on the spot to actually having to prove that they had a real asset and they gave some of it to you.
And I bet you that most lower level bankers like myself would say, yeah, why not? Why shouldn't we? Because we did give you money from other creditors' deposits. This is the current paradigm that people operate under, that, you know, people deposit money in the bank and it's lent out to somebody else, which is so far from the truth, it's not funny.
Yeah, well, that that's really forcing them to. Well, I was going to use one of Dee's sayings, but I won't. Forcing them to ante up the information.
It doesn't force them. However, it brings a rather embarrassing set of options in their direction. And I'd imagine the reaction that they have, they start ducking for cover if they say, no, we don't want to put that into your agreement. That's pretty much your answer as to what's going on.
Yeah, now, one of the things we have to be careful of is differences between countries, and we can only find that out by going through this process, because there will be differences here and there throughout the world community, and this is going to end up being a world action. So the material that we produce to begin with should be solid, but in your for local conditions, be prepared to actually vary it as necessary for what's going on in your own system. For instance, Holly has put a message in here that her understanding of the banking, that in the Banking Act, now this would be a USA-centric comment, and I'm not familiar with banking acts in the US. The Banking Act says banks are not allowed to loan depositors money. If this is actual law, we need to get hold of all language. Now, if anyone in the chat room can indicate if they know whether that's the actual law in the United States, that's very interesting, because there's a little local twist for a start. Now, the question for them would be, why aren't they allowed to loan money? If you're not allowed to loan me money, what are you loaning me? Air?
Well, they can't loan deposit. Technically, they can't loan depositors money, not whether they're allowed or not. If you put $100,000 term deposit, okay, there is a clause in your contract that you break let's say you want to pull it out early, that you break a penalty, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if they've loaned it out, can you pull it out early and pay the penalty? No, because the money is not there in their books, so they are actually unable to loan it.
Indeed, and in fact, Scott's pointed out that they loan you money by essentially stealing your deposit of your promissory note. They're actually, pirates on the high seas. They're actually taking those promissory notes without our permission. We never gave them permission to do that.
See, typically, as I'm picturing it in my mind, if you get a checkbook or you write a check, and that's basically a demand for payment. Once that check is processed and it's stamped and everything, you get that check back. Normally, at least in the United States, you get that check back as canceled, for your records. They keep a copy or whatever that they have for the transaction, but you're supposed to get that back. Now, when we sign our promissory notes, do we ever get the stamped promissory note back? It disappears somewhere into oblivion.
We don't get our checks back here. Once you issue that check, it's gone. It goes to whoever you're paying, and they put it into their bank account. You never see it again.
See, no, we get ours back.
That's interesting.
We get the canceled check back.
Cancelled. It's an interesting use of words.
Yeah, that's what they're called.
Because it's not cancelled. I mean, cancelled to me says we're returning it to you.
I'm looking in the chat room. It used to be that way. It doesn't happen anymore. So they're probably monetizing those and selling them as well.
They could well be doing that. So as we move into this process, there's going to be several stages that we go through, and ultimately the objective is to end up in a situation where people don't have to go through this process, that they can simply go to a bank and, whatever banks are actually still running at that point, and actually make these arrangements as a routine thing. We're, again, way showing we're actually driving this forward.
Yeah, agreed. And I do think that there is a shift. I really believe that there is a shift at the higher levels, and it will eventually peter down, but we have to meet it in the middle.
We do. Our energy has to be injected into the equation. And in fact, do you want to speak to the energetics of that, Lisa? We had a bit of a discussion before the show about energetics in that system. And that is in strong part what we're doing here.
Okay, this is normally a discussion we'd have on tomorrow's show, but what I have been told numerous times by numerous sources over the last week is that we are in a period right now, and have been for the last 3 months, of, let's say, an influx of walk-ins. And it's happening, okay, I'll recap. I'll take a step back. When you look at all the spiritual information, energetic information that's come out over the last few years, a lot of the talk has been centered around the light quotient on this planet needing to reach a certain level before we can really break through. And apparently what has happened, and this whole movement around the One People's Public Trust has played a big part, so I'm told, in upping the light quotient on this planet beyond what was expected and beyond what was needed for us to make the shift. So anybody who's still saying that we're not there yet apparently hasn't caught up to speed. We are there. The shift is happening. We are in the throes of it, and we have exceeded all expectations. This walk-in and where we're at right now is that those who are still stuck, willfully or not, in the dark, so to speak, they're no longer supported. And as we've talked about on the Collective Imagination show for the last year, it's nothing that is based in lies and fraud seems to be sustainable anymore. The light is being shone in all the dark places. We've been saying that for ages. And so anybody who is basically operating at a base frequency that is too low, is not being sustained. And what's happening is that they are experiencing a walk-in process, which is a greater part of them is coming in, is stepping in. And in Heather speak, what it's doing is dealing with it's reconciling, basically. And we're seeing, someone pointed out the evidence of that in certain circumstances. There's been a couple of things going on with the Vatican and within the Catholic Church over the last couple of weeks, again. People being caught doing various nefarious things. And
literally caught with their pants down?
Literally caught with their pants down. So far, I've seen a priest masturbating during Mass, which was fabulous.
Gross.
Another one got caught in a park. And these aren't just... I think the guy caught in the park was a pastor, but the one that was caught in church was quite high level. But anyway, there was one story of a cardinal or bishop who called the local Italian police to his apartment because he believed he'd been robbed. And when they got there, they were at first blown away by the sheer opulence that this guy was living in. But apparently he had stolen artworks, stuff that is actually on the international list of stolen classic artworks, in his apartment. And he's now in jail. Now, the curious thing about that is the Vatican has their own police force. They have their own military. They keep everything in-house. What prompted this guy to call the local Italian police? It's not standard practice. He wouldn't do it. But he did. And it landed himself in jail. So that would be an example from the person who gave me that information. That to her was an example of this guy having experienced a walk-in process, and he was now he was reconciling this gentleman's own karma, so to speak. And that it's happening right throughout the banking or the families or the cabal, whatever you want to call it. It's happening because those of them who do not want to see this process go through, do not want to see us move forward, energetically are just no longer supported. So it's get out or shape up or ship out, basically.
And the other interesting aspect is the timing. This walk-in process has been pretty much concluded now, but I think it's been trickling in since the solstice. Since the equinox, so March 21 to June 21, in that period, and it's kind of concluded now. And what we've been told is that this process has been going on throughout the whole system. Now, part of that is banking, but there are also other parts. There's the pharmaceuticals and the military and whatever else the cabal have their little tentacles into. And it's very interesting timing that process is completing, and that extra injection of consciousness or soul into those people has taken place and concluded pretty much about the time that we're ready to move. We, the one people, are ready to start moving this new energy into the system. And because the way it should play out is that there'll be silly things going on, like the priests. For instance, that's just the Three Stooges. But what we should find is that there's less resistance throughout the system to what the people want. So when we go to see the banks, at the highest levels of banks, because what will happen is we put the energy into the system, that knowledge will bound up the system, the word will be passed up the system, hey, we're being asked to monetize promissory notes, what do we do? Help. And what will come down from the top eventually will be, yeah, go ahead. And the resistance to making that policy shift is the probable outcome of this walk-in process, and the timing is conspicuously in our favour. So I say thumbs up to the whole thing.
Yes, so sorry, I was muted. Talking away. Muted.
Yep.
Do we have Helen yet?
Good question. Couple of minutes. She said she'd be here on the hour. It's a couple of minutes before that. I'll just see if she's available.
We've got one person in here with their hand up. Do you want to take a call while we wait for Helen?
Why not?
Why not? Okay. Oh, no, they just hung up, and now we've got another one.
Oh,
okay.
Here we go.
Okay, we've got area code 248.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. What's your name?
My name's Mike.
Hi, Mike.
How you doing, guys?
We're really good.
Yeah, I wanted to call in. I wanted to make some points. Some of the information that I've found out about the banking system. I'm sorry, I was kind of caught off guard. I wasn't expecting to get through, but
that's
anyway,
okay. You're among friends. Just chat.
Just a conversation. We're just having a conversation.
Yep, no problem. One of the things I wanted to kind of point out that seems to get missed is in the current banking system, the most important thing is the ability to pay the loan. It doesn't get brought up when you guys are talking about the way the banking system works. So, sorry.
What was your name again?
Mike.
Mike. Actually,
yep.
we've had some quite but this is one of the problems we have with doing these shows. We have these quite long, detailed conversations off air between shows, and not everything we talk about arrives on the show at the other end, just because of the way the conversations unfold. The actual ability to repay is actually a major feature of the manipulation they're doing.
Right,
and
that's what keeps the slavery system going. It's like they're keeping you in the loop, making sure that you're constantly on the treadmill, chasing that carrot. That's
exactly
the most important part, keeping people, in that.
Keeping people committed. Yeah, keep their cash flow committed to the hilt, so they're so stressed and trying to keep up with it all, they won't pay attention to politics and they won't pay attention to wars. All they'll do is just try to survive. It's a nasty little game. Now, Mike,
right.
What I'll let you do, you obviously want to put forward some information about this ability to repay manipulation that they do. Why don't you do that? We'll bring it up with Helen a bit later, because it's actually a really hot topic with her, because she has actual documents showing that they do this. So what's been your experience with the way they manipulate those figures?
Well, the reason why I bring that up is I just wanted to, just kind of warn people to tread carefully if they go down that path, because really what happened in America when we had our financial collapse was, what really set it off is there was a lot of loans that were created that people just couldn't pay. They were having a field day just giving out loans to people who were really weren't in a position to be able to pay. And so what they were doing is they were, deliberately creating those loans. They knew they could sell them down the road, securitize them. They're getting the rating agency to just put a AAA stamp on them. They'd ship them out the door. And that's how this, really this collapse started, is because really there were so many bad loans out there. And so what ends up happening is when the person defaults on the loan, what happens is the insurance kicks in for the bank. The insurance pays off. They have their insurance for each loan if it goes bad, right? So when they went bad, they collected on the insurance, and that's what taxed AIG, and that's what brought AIG down. And so the next level beyond that, if AIG can't pay, which they went under, what the Fed does, the Fed then steps in, and they just print money for those to keep those banks going. So really, I mean, if that's the goal, I guess my whole point is it was really it was kind of, you could call it fraud. They knew that these people weren't being able to pay the loans, so that's why they went back.
Okay, Mike, can I just say something at this point?
Sure.
I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that none of that is an accident, that it was all pre-planned. Right. They knew that if they, because same thing happened here. 80s and early 90s, they were very strict on ensuring that people's mortgage repayments only made up a certain percentage of their income. That all changed. Suddenly people could borrow 3 times the amount that they could have 12 months before. And if it is all by design, that they knew the domino effect, and they could see the repercussions in 5 to 10 years down the track, which is what I believe they did, then for me the question is why? Why do that? And it's never, in my experience, it's never just one reason. But from back to looking at the bigger kind of spiritual picture, what's the result of all of this? The result is people got really uncomfortable and woke up.
Right.
So
it was
if
definitely about
that's
it woke me up.
So who's working for who here? The more uncomfortable they make it for us, the more they wake us up.
And honestly, really, what's getting paid? I mean, you're exchanging one IOU for another. You know, Federal Reserve note. It's not payment at all because there's no money.
Right. Well, here's the biggest point is when you're going in there, when you're talking about going into the bank, getting them to create a note. That's really based on assuming the fact that you're going to pay that back, right? That's really how the old system worked. It was based on you're taking out the note with the intention to pay. Okay, so that's how they can monetize it because the actual, they just assume they check your credit, you got good credit, you're going to be able to pay this loan. They can securitize it, they sell it. That's the whole point of it. So if you guys, I just want to make sure everybody's careful. If they're going into the bank to create a note without the intention to pay it, in the old system, that really can be construed as fraud, right? I don't want anyone to get in trouble, going in there.
We're not applying for it. We wouldn't be applying for a loan.
Okay.
It's only a loan intent to pay it back.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as the terms are clear, you're not coming in to borrow money. That's quite clear. You're actually coming in to collect. You collect
the creditor,
right?
Yeah,
I understand that.
Yeah, you just that's one of the reasons.
Intention going in. I know that's your intention going in, but maybe the bankers on the other end are seeing that opportunity, like, oh, okay, we can securitize this. We won't tell anybody that they don't plan to pay. We'll sell this off, and then we're back in the same loop, right?
Well, that's part of absolute transparency, and which is one of the reasons why the documents need to be worded in such a way that nothing can be misconstrued, that no attempt for fraud, or deception can be made, that everything is transparent, printed right there on the page, so that everyone can see where the value is coming from and what it's to be used for.
And the terms and conditions that Heather will actually be putting forward, I expect to include terms which will preclude the bank from doing anything with the deposit of value that you've made. Okay, so without
your knowledge and consent.
They'd need your consent to do anything at all. In fact, I'd like to see it so that the only thing they can do is actually carry out transactions at your request for a fee. That's it. Because you're quite right, Mike. If they start monetizing some of these, if they start accepting things that weren't correctly done, they could try and sneak off and monetize them, and we're just going straight back to the same problem. So you're quite right. But my expectation, I haven't seen the documents yet, but my expectation that is in there will be terms and conditions that preclude the bank from playing those games. Because it's those games we've got to put an end to.
When we go in there with what Heather was saying back in last week's show in her recording, is it's really when we go in with the underwriting of the of the One People's Public Trust, or I don't know if everything's really actually in that trust, you can technically just go to the bank and say, all right, here it is. It's underwritten by this trust. Go get it if we want to go that route. And I know we want to get to the point where we're out of this this slavery system and we're using the IUV in change. You guys are calling that, I believe now. I think we're better off going that route where we're using the funds that have been held aside in the trust. That's my only point. So
Heather did mention that for this now doing, but I don't know whether that has changed with the new information that she's received. But she did mention that we don't have to securitize on the public registry that note because it already has been at least the $10 billion in the public trust.
And there's also the possibility that the final form of the document she's working on will simply be underwritten by us. Okay, because we individually have the ability to underwrite anything that we do. That's actually part of our real value. That is our real value. And we really shouldn't even need to rely on the actions that the trust took to essentially name damages per individual against the deceptive acts and practices of the old system. It'll be very interesting.
Either way, Chris, it will evolve to that. Even if they use the trust in the interim, it will evolve because at the same time, the trust itself was just basically done by common ordinary people.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ultimate goal is a moneyless society. And we may skip one or two steps, or we may make quantum jumps to be right there. That would be ideal. But either way, it's the end result. It's the direction in which we're moving. And which steps we have to take in order to get there is unknown by me or anybody else. If anybody tells you this is what A, B, C, D is going to happen, I would say they're full of it because nobody knows. We don't know. We know what the end result is going to be. But we don't know how we're going to get there or how many steps we have to take. And to speak to, some of the information that has been coming out, whether the RV will happen and or not, that latest post, I haven't even read the whole thing because as I told the rest of the crew, they asked me, did you read it? We were going to comment on it. But immediately, when I hear Zap, Casper, Poof, or anyone, I see a lack of transparency. Immediately. I am Bob Wright. This is Lisa Harrison, Chris Hales, Scott Bartle. You have our email address. Many of you have my phone number, my Skype contact. There's immediately a lack of transparency. Now, they can say that, well, we're, for our own security reasons. But even that is coming from a space of fear. So the whole package just, in an energetic sense, it just gives me indigestion.
Energetic indigestion.
Indigestion, yeah. Now, Bob, we actually have Helen here to bring forth her information. Are you able to pull her into Skype? Is she on your Skype kit? You might actually, if Brian's not there, you might actually turn Brian off at the moment, just so we don't...
No, he's listening. He's just
He
muted.
is listening, is he? Okay, he's just muted. No problem. We'll see how we go. Here we go.
Welcome,
Good morning, Helen.
Hi there. How are you all?
We're really good.
Good. Thank
How
you.
did visit number 5 go?
Good. Oh,
okay, so
number... Yes.
We've told everybody what you've been doing. They love the idea of having them come to you. I have to say.
Right. Yes.
So just briefly, you've had 5 visits so far from brokers.
Yes.
Just give us a recap on the responses you've had from them.
Okay. Well, do you want me to name the banks themselves, or?
Yes.
Yep.
That'll be helpful to those in Australia listening.
Okay. Now we've got an echo there. Is that a problem at my end, or?
I can't hear it.
We're fine here.
Okay.
So just press on unless it's really bothering you.
No, that's fine. Right. The first bank was ANZ. The next one was the NAB. The next one was CBA. The next one was a credit union called Vic Teachers Credit Union, and the last one just gone was Citibank. So, in a nutshell, I just used a little sheet that had that I got from Uwe and Scott that had a statement from the IMF that said, under the present system, banks do not have to wait for depositors to appear and make funds available before they can on-lend or intermediate those funds. Rather, they create their own funds or deposits in the act of lending. And this fact can be verified in the description of the money creation system in many central bank statements, and is obvious to anybody who's lent money and created the resulting book entries. So I just sort of gently, what I said to each of them was, when I was setting the appointment up and when they turned up, is that my objective is to look at what my options are. I'm looking to get some additional funding, and I wanted to see what the options were outside of the normal lending process, and that I'd read about the issue of promissory notes and how the banks accepted those as cash, but also that might have been, I wanted them to explain to me about what they knew about the banks creating the funds. Where did the funds come from? Now, and my husband was here for most of those meetings as well, which was good to get his perspective. But in a nutshell, the only one that really sort of said anything was the ANZ. And that gentleman had been in banking for about 27 years, and he did admit the fact that the banks create money from the act of lending, and that they don't necessarily have the funding there, and that the very act of lending is what creates the extra money. So he sort of alluded that, but he said to me also that nobody asks about this. Nobody knows about it really generally, and nobody asks about it. So then I sort of asked them about, well, how are promissory notes used? And one of the quotes I've got from Modern Money Mechanics on my little sheet, it says, what they do when they make loans is accept promissory notes in exchange for credits to the borrower's transaction account. So I asked them what this meant and what did they understand about it. Out of the 5, 4 of them said categorically there was no such thing used in their bank. Categorically, 4 of them, except the ANZ, also said that banks only use funds they either have or funds they borrow, or the profits they make from the difference in interest, i.e. they pay a depositor interest and then they lend it out at a higher interest rate. So categorically, all of them denied that there was any, in fact saying that the IMF statement was wrong, and that it might apply in some situations, but it definitely didn't apply to general banking practice.
Now, you didn't get the feeling from these guys that they were just spinning you a line. You actually felt that this is what they believe. They truly believe this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so much so that, one of them, the lady, they were all very nice people, let me tell you this. The lady from the CBA, basically my husband said she's got the cone of silence over her ears. So it was almost like they couldn't believe it. It didn't come into their concept of reality. Therefore, they couldn't accept it. And it was just like a broken record. No, it's not like that. And I made them draw me little pictures. Can you please explain further? But there was no room in their reality to accept it.
Helen, at this point, maybe it might be good to ask them. Oh, there's the echo. We found it. There it is.
You'll need to mute, Helen.
Hang on a sec. Sorry.
If you can mute the show if it's playing in the background, I don't know. But ask her.
Is that no?
No, that's fine now.
Yep.
Ask her where that information is under the banking regulations, that they do their business that way, or in their company policy. Because according to the Federal Reserve regulations, it works this way. So either you're not following the Federal Reserve regulations, or you've created your own policy. Can you please show me where it says that?
Okay.
Well, one of the things one of the things I was reading from The Economist was what's happening is when they have a reserve requirement that they need to meet when they, with their fractional reserve system, right? So what happens is they just make loans whatever quarter or whatever period of time, and as long as they meet that reserve requirement, they look and see how many loans they've made. Then they go and borrow what they need to meet that reserve requirement. So, yeah, technically that's true. They'll just keep, lending the money out, and they don't really have it. But as long as they meet the requirement for the Federal Reserve to have that minimum reserve requirement, they're fine.
They all knew about the reserve, that the bank has certain reserves, but none of them, I believe that none of them actually understand one single thing about the fractional banking routine. That's my the last guy from Citibank did, however, admit that if somebody's got a deposit of $100,000, that the bank can then lend that out. But in the depositor's mind, the money is still there. In their mind only, it actually isn't. And then he did let slip that, well, then they can lend it out again. But then when I pressed him about that, he backtracked really majorly. Oh, no. So he sort of did, but they won't even go down either they don't know about it or they won't even go down the road of admitting that that is actually what's going on.
Now, Helen, you have spent some time in a loans processing centre at a bank some years ago.
Yes, I worked for a few months with the Westpac Mortgage Processing Centre in Adelaide.
Okay, now how many loans a month were they putting through?
Oh, God, thousands. It's a factory. It's a processing factory.
Yeah, someone referred to it as a sausage plant earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that factory was just a matter of people in cubicles checking documentation and passing it through. Because one of the comments we had before was about the way that they manipulate the figures on the loan application to guarantee that you get the loan, and they do that without the knowledge of the person making the application. Now, you've got some actual proof that they're doing that.
Oh, gosh. I worked in that field a year ago, quite very long hours, helping people put their paperwork together for FOS and stuff like that. And
you'll need to explain what FOS is.
So FOS is what is our supposed independent regulator. It stands for Financial Ombudsman Services. So what they're supposed to be is an independent area for the public to make complaints if they feel that there's something funny going on with their bank. However, and so because of the amount of bank fraud, document fraud that is happening in Australia, it's not systemic. It's not just random. It is systemic. When I was helping some people with this area, every single loan I looked at, trying to help people sort out what the bloody mess had been, the figures had been altered from what the borrower had originally inserted, and this is dead easy to see. A 12-year-old can see it. All you got to do is put side by side the original information or wet ink documents or verifiable taxable stuff next to the documents that have then been filled out in someone else's handwriting to see the problem. But what happens in banking in Australia, at least is where I know, is that when you sign a document and you sign that application, you never ever see a document that's signed by the bank or the lender. And so what happens is you sign that thinking that, yes, the figures I've provided are what the bank is going to assess the loan on. And in actual fact, what then happens, if it's the broker, they are definitely under instruction from the bank, because the broker is the bank's agent. So the broker or the bank's assessing agent is altering the loan details, particularly the income, the assets and the expenditure, to make the loan, to make those numbers fit so the loan can be approved. Now, I've got truckloads of proof. Another lady called Denise Brayley, she's got thousands of documentation of proof of this. And so FOS is supposed to regulate this and be Just
to stop you there, Helen, what they're actually doing then is you make a loan application for, say, $500,000.
Yep.
And you make a statement in that application that you've got certain costs per month, you've got certain income coming in, certain costs going out, and the broker is supposed to be under an obligation to make sure that you can afford the loan. But what they do, in fact, they in collusion with the bank, they actually put your either put up your assets or reduce your costs, or both, to make the actual figures you put in fit the amount of money that you've requested for.
Correct.
And you don't know it. They're actually fiddling your figures.
Yes.
Well, this is what just happened in the States too, and the equivalent of FOS over there, who was doing the investigation, looking into all the bank's paperwork, just put their hands up in the end and went, yeah, it's all too hard.
It is, but the problem we've got to remember too is that the bank, these so-called independent organisations are actually funded by the banks. And our problem started when the banks were deregulated and they could start to police themselves. And we all know how well that works.
Mm-hmm.
So in a nutshell, we have the big problem in Australia that's huge pushes, but the government is obviously too busy worried about what's going on, behind their apron curtain kind of thing, is that You put your loan application in, surprise, surprise, you get the loan approved, you think it's all good, so you struggle on. A few years later, you suddenly, all of your reserves are cash out, you can't afford it, and so you wonder what the hell happened, feeling like an idiot and embarrassed for getting into this situation. But what's happened is, by law, you were supposed to be given a copy of your loan documents showing both signatures, that is the lender and the borrower. That's the only thing that makes a legal contract. But you're never given any copies. You're given what are called client copies that are just, it's just a cover sheet here and there. It's not the actual documentation. And therefore, you never realise that the fraud has been perpetrated against you until it's too late. Then what happens is the banks move in immediately, sending their lawyers to default you quickly. They move in, repossess the home. Now, in Australia, we've got a different situation to America in this repossession. In America, my understanding is that if I default on my loan, I can pretty much put the keys in the letterbox and walk away, and there's no recourse. In Australia, they've stitched it up so that if I default on my loan, the bank can firstly claim the mortgage insurance that I've paid for, which people think is to protect them, but is only to protect the bank. And I rank, there's only 2 mortgage insurance companies in Australia. One's called Genworth, and I forget the other one, but huge businesses. So you pay the mortgage insurance to protect the bank in case you default, so they get paid out on the insurance. The second thing is, because they foreclose on you, they take the home away, so they now have the home in their hands. They can then sell it, and for whatever they want, without having to really make big effort, because it's just money for jam. Whatever they sell it for is 100% profit. The fourth way they can get paid for the loan is, that's the third way. The fourth way is that once they've foreclosed, once they've sold, in Australia they can still chase you for the rest of the money and bankrupt you. But not only that, because of the problem of securitization, pretty much since 1986 in Australia, as soon as you sign their loan document, they sell them into mortgage-backed securities, which is just they pool your loan into 3 billion with 3,000 other loans. They sell it as a security stock item on the stock market, and investors buy into it. So they break the chain of title, and who the real party of interest is the big question. So the fifth way they've got a return on that single mortgage is because they've already sold it and they've been paid immediately. So it's systemic, and our regulators are saying there's no problem. The FOS, those kind of protection agencies, are saying there's no problem, and their annual reports tell you how many times they see they find or make a recommendation or determination in favour of the banks. The other thing that they're doing to make it even more interesting for the poor, the great unwashed, is that in the so-called informal, remedy sessions that you get with your bank and a FOS and yourself, the banks are actually bringing their lawyers in to sit in those informal sessions, and so they're intimidating the poor lender, the poor borrower in other ways as well. So we've got big problems here, and of course, but we know they're just making the money that the money is created from our signature and that they're monetising it. But not everybody knows yet.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, that in here in Australia, that they do come after you. They will sell a house that is worth, say, $500,000,
yep,
that you owe $500,000 on, thanks to all
yep,
the interest, for $200,000.
Yep.
Just turn it, usually to one of their mates.
Yep.
And then come after you and bankrupt you and take everything you've got to make
Correct.
up the balance.
Exactly. But the problem is, or the issue is, they've already been paid 2 or 3 times. They received the value of that property 2 or 3. There was a case in Melbourne a few years ago where a $600,000 house valued at, the guy only owed $100,000 on it. The bank foreclosed and sold it for $1,000.
Yes, I remember that one.
You remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So we got big issues here, but obviously now we know that the banks have all closed, and we've just got to wake the people up and more, and let the banks know that we know.
Yeah, that's the difference.
Did they go into the double? Did they go into
never before.
bookkeeping?
Yeah,
Did
you'll
any
need
of those
to
thinkers
mute
talk
yourself,
about
Helen.
I wanted Helen to answer, if possible.
And your
if she found out anything.
Can you repeat the question, Mike?
Yeah, I had a question about if any of those bankers you were speaking to talked about double entry bookkeeping, and how that works?
A couple of them did. They understand that when a deposit comes in, it goes on one side and then it goes out on the other. And when when they lend money, that's then a credit for the bank, an asset for the bank, because it's an IOU. It's a bit like, as a business owner, if I write invoices out at the end of the financial year that aren't paid until the next financial year, well, they go as an asset because it's cash still coming in. So they do understand that, but then they just got it. Their eyes just glaze over when you talk about the fact of the signature creates the asset or the lend. But the lend is what creates the. Go on.
That's like the biggest mystery to me that I've been trying to nail down that point where when they create the asset on the one side of the book and the debit on the other side of the book. What I'm not entirely clear about is when, as the loan's getting paid back, is that all profit for them, or does it just get taken away from the one entry on the book? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, they're not answering that question, because every time you ask a bank about any of these people about, can you please show me the accounting, because what do the numbers say, they can't come to the party. And I've pressed Westpac about that, I've pressed Bank West about that, and I've pressed Citibank about that in terms of other arrangements I've had with them. None of them can produce it, and they won't produce it because the lie is revealed. And that's the same thing with the banks in terms of people's mortgage, their paperwork, their loan applications. You ask them for the full set. A full set of loan docs is about 37 pages, right? They will only give you maximum 13. And it doesn't include any of the information you want. They won't give it to you because in the documentation is the lie.
Yeah, of course, the other part of the equation, Helen, is that the court system apparently works for them as well. Because you try to put that in front of a court, and they won't accept that as a valid argument. Scott has a saying that all they do in court is point to a piece of paper with your signature on it and say, "Did you sign this?"
Yes, a lot of people have been caught out with that, yep.
And the whole paper trail is never put under the scrutiny of the court, ever,
that's
as far as
right.
I can see.
And look, I think the thing is you only have to look at, in some buildings, the lawyers' offices, head offices are in the same building as the bank's head offices. I mean, if they're not kissing cousins, I don't know what's going on. But when I was dealing with, when I was helping people with their paperwork, and we come across this statement all the time, yes, but you signed it saying that the income and stuff was true. And what I realised is, and I've seen this because I've seen a lot of documentation where a bank, we couldn't work out what was going on. And you see, but in the old days with the faxes, it was the fax stamps that disclosed the fraud, because we had one particular guy, yes, we had his page that's got the signature, yes, all this, what I've said to you is all true and verifiable, but then we couldn't work out how come that page of signature was attached to some other documentation he'd never seen before, 2 other pages. So when I looked at the fax stamps, what had happened is they'd taken the last page, or page 2 of where he's saying, yes, it's a declaration of everything is true, and they'd connected that, allonged, as they say, to 2 other pages of falsified income and financial statement stuff, saying that, but you signed off on this stuff. So what we've discovered is that, yes, people are saying, I'm saying that this is all true, and then it's being used against them because they don't realise that that's being allonged with the falsified documentation.
So that those documents created by the brokers that fudge the numbers are not the ones being shown in court. No. Well, you see, the problem is the banks are using the excuse that they don't need to show this paperwork because it's commercially sensitive. There's a particular document in the assessment process and approval process called a serviceability calculator, and it's the actual document where they have all the final figures that they use to approve the loan, and it shows what the surplus is in terms of, after all your expenses and the loan payments, how much do you actually have to live by, to live on per year, over that year. And so this document called a loan serviceability document is the actual proof of
the numbers that the bank uses to approve it. And when you can see that document, there it is. But what's going on is the banks are saying that it's commercially sensitive. Well, of course it's, and so the regulators are saying, oh, well, okay, it's commercially sensitive. We won't make them produce it, even though that's the very document that shows the fraud. So this is how they're getting around it. The lawyers are supporting them in it because it's all in there together. I mean, it's a whole money made. The court system is obviously just a huge revenue tool, and that's like when you go to court, for example, for like a speeding fine. If you're in a company, they say, look, you can pay all the speeding fines, and that way you won't lose your demerit points. So I've been caught in that track, and people pay thousands of dollars. And all you need to do is look at their annual reports, and their revenue projections for next year are always larger. So it's just, it's a business. Courts are a business.
It is, and Scott just pointed out here in the chat. Do you want something in the chat? Do you want to read out what you just put in, Scott?
Yeah, it's an interesting little quote from the Constitution of Law Courts Limited, a company limited by guarantee. This is a company that supposedly is the court of New South Wales. And I'll just read out this one sentence under the heading of company objects, or I guess objectives. To draw, make, accept, endorse, discount, execute and issue promissory notes, bills of exchange, bills of lading, warrants, debentures and other negotiable or transferable instruments. Now, if that doesn't raise a little bit of suspicion about whether the court is actually more like a bank, then I don't know what does.
Yeah.
That's the Constitution of the Law Courts Limited of New South Wales.
Oh, dear.
There's nothing about law in there.
No.
Well, not that bit.
Well, the actual, when you approach the bench, in legal terms, the bench is the bank.
It's the teller. You're approaching the teller.
Yeah, if you're approaching the bank.
Wow.
Yeah, well, the judge is basically there to settle accounts.
Yep.
Okay, there's no justice or justness in the system at all. It's purely commercial.
It's perverted here. Everybody listening knows all this.
Yeah, they do know all this, and it's going on in every country in the world. The template across the whole planet is fairly consistent. Local variations aside, it's fairly consistent. They've basically been lying on their documentation. The courts have been not requiring them to produce it when a confrontation ensues, and they've been loaning out in large quantities. Making large quantities of loans to people who would, at levels they would never be able to afford. The apparent objective appears to be to take property away from people and keep them under stress and keep the whole situation unstable, because unstable means easy to direct. I'll just point out something. I'll just point out one thing, Helen. Yeah. Fighter aircraft are built to be unstable because they're highly maneuverable when they're unstable. And I'm convinced that they keep the stock market and the financial systems unstable because they can then push and pull at them and tweak them in whatever direction they want to. Now, the downside to that for them, as Lisa pointed out before, is when they put us under a lot of stress, we get unhappy and start paying attention to what's going on, and it wakes people up. That's not our problem. That's their problem with the game they're playing.
Well, I think we're just pretty much the whole the financial market is just their playground. It's really just their playground, and we know that it's all manipulated, the stock market. And the guy from Citibank today basically said, everything has just got whatever value somebody's prepared to accept for it. We know all our money's just because of our perception about it. But I forgot what I was going to say before, but anyway, it's rampant. If people have got problems with their mortgages though and they're under pressure, the first thing they need to do is ask the bank for a copy of their loan application forms, the full set. They won't get them, or they'll get them modified, or they'll be lost or destroyed or also and then put a complaint into FOS, because once your bank starts to move against you, if you put your application into FOS for a complaint, then the bank cannot move against you by law. and then it gives you breathing space to sort out what's going on. So at the moment, when I did the calculations back in September, looking at the difference between case numbers and time, FOS were getting over 150 new applications a day. Now, that's not case numbers, and then they were telling those people it's going to be months before we can even get you a case manager. They are completely overwhelmed, and of course they don't know either, and they're not serving the public very well at all.
Yeah. Yeah, Uwe has some views on the timing of that, and Scott wanted to point out, I'm just reading out of the chat here, that the Financial Ombudsman Service, or FOS, that Helen's referring to, is actually called the Financial Ombudsman Services Limited.
So it's
another
a business.
company. And also, this structure actually exists in Australia. This is a sort of an Australian-centric discussion we're having here. Uwe, you wanted to make a comment about timing about that FOS application.
Yeah, just 1 minute quickly. Basically, I was aware that FOS existed when I started my discovery process on our home loan in December. And as Scott and I were asking such pertinent questions, the lender didn't stop. They moved straight into court, went to the local Supreme Court, the highest judge in the state, and went for possession. They actually tried to get possession on our house inside 5 weeks. And we came to the point where we really didn't have a lot of room to move anymore. We offered to pay the arrears. They actually rejected that. They really wanted to set an example by the looks. And then on the day of that deadline, handing over possession, we lodged a dispute with FOS, which was the first time. Now, you can only lodge on the same loan, I believe, Helen, correct me if I'm wrong, one dispute. So once that dispute was in the system, it froze all the action and bought a lot of time. That's basically, I just wanted to put that in.
Yep.
Sure. Okay, now, Lisa, do you want to go for some callers?
Yes, let's do that. We've got area code 336. Area code 336.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, it's Randy from North Carolina.
Hey, Randy, how you doing? Randy?
I'm good. How are you? Randy?
Randy?
I love how you say that.
How are you, darling?
I'm great. Hope you are.
I am great, yes. I feel fabulous.
Listen, I am interested in buying a home. Should I wait until these documents come out? I can only give you what I would do in this situation. Personally, I wouldn't be going anywhere near a bank right now. I'm waiting until I can establish a new relationship. Okay.
On the other hand, I don't see the point at this stage. Mind you, they wouldn't give me one, but anyway.
I'm getting a really good deal, and I just don't have the cash to do it. So
time is of the essence with this one, is it?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, does anybody else want to chime in on that one?
Well, did the gentleman say that he doesn't have the cash to do it anyway? Is that what he said?
He would need to get a mortgage on it. Yeah, he'd need to get a mortgage.
But do you have the cash to do the deposit, even if it's a good deal?
No.
Okay, so that answers your own question. If you can't get the deposit, they're not going to. You can't get the deal anyway, so you're probably just better off, like Lisa said, just wait, hang off a bit. The deal's going to be even better because you're not going to be in debt.
Okay. So
does that make sense, Lisa?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just make space for it, Randy. Put the intention out there. You want to purchase this home. Is it this particular home, or you just want to purchase a home, or do you?
Well, it's actually a farm, and it's 5 acres of land, and that's what I'm interested in.
Okay. So you want at least 5 acres of land to work with.
Yes.
You'll have it.
It
may not be that particular piece of land, and it may be, right? But put the intent. It's almost like when you decide that you're going to quit your job. You've made applications, and suddenly someone said yes, and you've made the decision that I'm going to take this job. okay? And I'm going to quit the current employment. As soon as you make that decision, there's an instant change. There's an instant change in your feeling and an instant change because you've decided you know what you're going to do. Or if you decide that you're going to move someplace, and you may not even know where, I'm leaving, and you make that decision, there's an instant energetic change that you feel, a shift. Make the decision that you're going to buy a piece of property or this piece of property. Make that energetic shift that is what you have decided to do. And you may not know how, okay, but hold that space and maintain that level of excitement about it. Because when you're in your last week of work, and especially if it's a job that you hate, it's the best week of work you're going to have. There's no stress, because they're not. What, are they going to fire you? You don't. You let it go. And this is the part, in manifesting that people have the hardest time with. Just let it go.
Well, I'm kind of in an interesting situation where I have people begging me to work for them.
Well, that's a testament to you, Randy.
The other thing, too, if you keep your eye on what you want rather than a specific, you're very clear about what you want rather than, I want that house or I want that property. Well, see, there might be something, you might have spotted that one and that's got the motivation going, but you don't know whether there's actually a better, more perfect property, more suited, an even better deal to come on. So this is what, for me, what what Bob is saying there, I think, is that yes, get that dream, get that vision for it, but then detach yourself from the actual result and let the perfect result come to you. But you must be very clear about, I want this many acres, I want it to have these kinds of features, this, that, and the other thing. So be very clear about that, but not attached to it's got to be that property. Because what if there was something else better in the wings? So the universe is going to give you what you want instead of what you could have had.
Well,
yeah, exactly, Helen.
What you're saying. It's interesting what you're saying because I have driven by this property so many times, so many years, thinking I would love to have this place. Well, then suddenly it's up for sale and it's available to me personally, and the guy's trying to get me to go to the bank, and I'm thinking, no, I'm not ready to go to the bank. What do I need to do? And so that's why I'm on with you guys.
What about starting a conversation with him about doing some form of exchange?
Yes.
And I think
whatever
that's
that
what he's willing to do. The guy's begging me to come to work for him full time.
Well, there you go. There's a perfect exchange.
Wow.
For the time being.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
but
your
also,
labour for a private contract with him doesn't have to be through a bank, Randy.
Yep.
Okay.
And also, I'd personally go one step further and in thinking about. I've stopped thinking about the idea of buying anything when it comes.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's just like it's just coming into my life.
Well, Randy, why don't you consider this? If this guy really wants you to work for him, I think part of the deal should be that you live on that property, and your work is, or some aspect of your work is the rent. It could be as simple a contract as that. You get to live where you want to, and you have in your contract that you've got first right of refusal should he decide he really needs to sell the property.
Okay.
There's a whole conversation you could have around this with him.
Exactly.
And come to an agreement that you're both happy with.
What an
That's our
opportunity.
suggestion, Randy.
Yeah. And look, before we go to the next call, just in case we run out of time, I just wanted to find out what Helen's views are on what aspects of the bank she would like to go to next to continue this conversation. What level, Helen, would you like to step up to? Given that you did 4 out of the 5 guys, 4 out of the 5 interviews were what we expected. 1 was really good. Where do you want to go with it?
Well, what I kept asking about, if you're not sure about promissory notes, and how they function, etc., and how they can be used, more mainstream, who can I speak to? And, none of them, they all had blank looks on their faces, no idea who to speak to. The Citibank guy told me, there's absolutely no one I can recommend you speak to. One of them, I said, well, she understood, she knew there were promissory notes, but I said, well, can you put me in touch with somebody who I could speak to? And she said, it'll take me a month to do. I don't know who to speak to, wouldn't even have a clue. So what I'm wanting to do now is, the next level then is to approach them about the commercial use of promissory notes. So I think I'm not going to get any more from the mobile lenders. They just don't know, and they're not willing to find out. So I think the next stage then is to actually maybe ring some investment line and ask them about the use of promissory notes in terms of investments and how does that work. So I think that's the way I'm going to approach it, because from the very bottom up, it's not working. It's not going to work any further at this stage.
Now, what if those lenders that you spoke to suddenly found they were having appointment after appointment where people were asking the same question? People who appeared to be completely unrelated to one another were asking them the same question. How do you think they'd deal with that?
I think they're going to firstly look at it as a nuisance, because what are these another stupid question kind of attitude. That's my thing, because they're only focused on, they know how to fill out lending forms. That's pretty much it. I think that'll be the first response. But the second response is they physically don't know how it works, or even who to speak to in their bank. So I think it's going to take quite a few people to then start to make that shift. But I think what will work also is, as it comes from the top down, as the bank leaders are informed somehow through the documentation, that's coming through Heather, or some other form of documentation that might be being developed in other places, to go from the head down, and so approach it from both points of view. Okay, so let's say the heads of the banks have been informed, politely and etc. about that this is the situation, and people are now going to be coming to you. You need to be prepared, but then at the same time have documentation that can be produced at the ground level to say, look, I've received this. Your executives know about this. I'm wanting to inquire on a personal level. Are you willing to look into this, considering your executives are aware of it and willing to help me?
Yeah, like I said, I think we're going to meet in the middle somewhere.
Yes.
Indeed. Look, when we've got documentation to put in front of these people, you can end the conversation by saying, here's my offer to contract. Obviously, you've never been briefed on this material before, and I understand that, but will you please pass it on to your supervisors with a request for them to pass it on to the bankers who deal with promissory notes?
Yep, that would be...
Have them push it up the system from their position.
Yeah, I think that would be the next stage from the grassroots level up, is to have something that can say, can you please pass it up? Because two interesting comments I had from these lenders. One said that there must be someone higher up who knows about it, but she wasn't willing to put me in contact with them because they don't speak to the public, and which was interesting. And the second one was that it's at a much higher level that the regular people just are not able to have access to. So I think having something like that, can you please pass it up the lineage, would be a great thing.
I wonder if you happen to purchase a couple of shares in a bank and rang up some of these people and said, I'm a shareholder. I'm not the public. I want to talk to you about this.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the easiest way still would be just to go, like I've been doing all the mobile lenders and I've pretty much done all of those, the main ones now. But then to go into, instead of like we were planning to go into the banks, to present our declarations, etc., maybe a bunch of us to go into banks and walk around and say, look, can I speak to your lending manager? Give them a documentation that explains what's happening, and saying, look, can you please pass this up? I'll be back in 2 days' time for another meeting, a little chat, just to see what we can do, if we can do business together under the new rules. I think that's going to be the next grassroots level steps for us out here.
Indeed. Look, and if anyone else out there listening wants to do what Helen has done in their country, in their location, that will be very useful, because we've had some indications from Bob that, the first bank manager that was approached by his uncle knew exactly what was going on. We might get a slightly different result, and if anyone has the urge to do this preparatory work, feel free to do it and get back to us, and we'll discuss it on next week's show. Hopefully we'll also have the documents in hand to start discussing as well, and that's obviously what is really needed to drive this to the next level. But there's nothing wrong with doing this preparatory work because we're learning how to talk to them, and that's important.
One thing, Chris, is that I didn't bring up the fact about bank foreclosures. I didn't want to put them on air. I didn't want to confront them. I did it softly, just from the banks creating money from the signature, and also about the use of promissory notes and treating them as cash. Something like that would be really valuable if we could do it. So instead of going from
typically what they would normally do is they would take that promissory note, they would discount it by 10%, because by discounting it by 10%, they put 10% of that in their reserves, which they can lend out 9 times over.
Yep.
So they're actually getting the full value.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, they won't actually be able to play with the 90%, which will end up in an account for you. The 10% is there, and that's the fee that you've agreed to give to them, is it not?
Right, but that's the way it worked in the past for people who understood how to write bonds or write promissory notes.
Yep.
It would be discounted by 10%. They would actually recover the full cost in the fractional reserve system.
Yep.
Because that 10% is all they need to keep in there for the reserve.
Yep.
Okay, guys, we're running out of time, and I just wanted Helen briefly to mention the public notice website. Can you give it?
Yes. Look, what I thought about it for a while, and then spoke with Beezy and Holly, and went ahead with that. Basically, with all our courtesy notices going out, and I've done truckloads, and I know that other people have done truckloads. Some have done a couple here and there. But what I discovered is that me as a little single person going in or sending that in was that the banks easily, as we've known, are ignoring it, pretending it's not there, and just shoving it on through the judiciary system, right? Ignoring us because it's not public forum. So when I investigated, and I thought, well, there are public notice boards everywhere, or in the newspapers, under legal notices or whatever. And so I realised then the purpose of those public notice boards is to make sure that the public know and the community knows stuff that's going on, whether it's legal notice or the latest fate or whatever. And so we set up the public notices website attached to the IUV site. And
Can you just put a link to it for me into the chat room?
Yeah, for sure. And it is www.i-uv.com. And basically what it is that people can, once they've sent their courtesy notices off and or invoices or statements, they can go to this site, click on the navigation where it says share your public notice, and then they can upload it, a little bit of info, they can upload it, and we will publish it on that site. And that means it's part of the public forum, the community forum. And so it's not just now that there's a courtesy notice between you and the ex-corporation. It's public knowledge, okay, and they can run, but they cannot hide. And this is just normal process. So then what you do is once we upload them for you, what you can then do is just let that ex-corporation know that it has been posted as part of a public notices board, and it is public forum. So the amazing thing is that we've already got over 100-something ex-corporations that have got courtesy notices. Some of them have got a lot, some of them have got just a couple, but the purpose is that it's mainstream knowledge, and that continues then to expand the awareness, and also, well, lets the ex-corporations know, but it also gives that individual confidence that their notification is in the public forum now.
In the public domain, basically.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
thank you so much, Helen, for everything you've contributed today.
No worries.
It's been awesome.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we'll have you back with more news. If that's okay with you. Now, Bob, everyone's asking for a quick update on your healing. How's your working going?
Well, I just typed it in the chat. Like I said, I kind of overdid it the other day, and today I was pretty achy. But the walking is getting less funny looking.
Every time Bob says, I'm so sore, I just go, yay! There's no sympathy here for sore muscles.
Yeah, now, I think Uwe had a final comment he wanted to make. Do you want to jump in right now, Uwe?
Yes, please, Uwe.
We can cover that next time. This was really about creating rapport with the people that we talk to. Let's discuss that in the background a bit, and maybe we can come up with some training scenarios and actually teach people how to overcome objections and just handle those things. We'll cover that next time or some other time.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, this is completely off topic that I'm going to go out with, but does anyone have anything else to add before I change the subject?
No, we wait with bated breath, Lisa.
Okay.
As you jump into the abyss.
As I jump into the abyss. Okay, firstly, TCI tomorrow, the Collective Imagination. The following day, we've got Enjoy with Judy and Brian. And keep an eye out we've also got the Remembering, obviously, and the Transitioning on the weekends. And keep an eye out for Chris and Scott. Starting their new show, The Repurposing, coming up on Sunday night for the States, Monday morning for Australia. Now, the message I just got is that apparently there is a out-of-control fire in the Mount Charleston area. And what's the message say exactly? Nation's biggest and most out-of-control fire is about half an hour from us in the Mount Charleston area. Homes are being evacuated, been burning for a week. It's only 15% containment. So if everybody who feels so inclined could do the necessary energy work that we I know this is a different audience, but I think you guys are along for the ride as well. To help
Which Mount Charleston, Lisa? Where is it?
I'm thinking the States. But Mark can help me on that because he's the one who sent me the message through.
Nevada, it says. Southern Nevada.
Southern Nevada? Okay.
That's what I can...
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to do the necessary work there, thank you very much. A lot of people are being affected by that one. All right, guys, it's been a good show again. And thank you for everyone's contributions. Awesome. We have much to do. We still have much to do. The work is just beginning, you know. But it's all fun from here on in as far as I'm concerned. So if you're not smart, you do it, as the saying goes. So see you all tomorrow. Much love to everybody. Bye, Chris.
Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.
Bye,
Thanks
Bob.
very much.
Good night.
Bye, Helen.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, Scott.
Cheers, guys.
See you, everybody.
Catch you.
Bye for now.